spiritual care, people have to listen to it. So I've been researching this area for a long time, and I'm very happy to share with you some of our research and from other research areas too. So I'll start with this. This is a cancer patient who was reflecting about his stay in a hospital. They ask about my needs. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? Do you have pain? Do you want art on the wall or a glass of red wine? Or to go to the pool or perhaps a concert in the hospital hall? It's nothing wrong with all this. But why did nobody ask me how I am facing grief and death? Was it my fault? Was I too soft-spoken? Why did nobody ask about my soul? And perhaps some of you recognize this last sentence from a very familiar book. I had to go to King James translation to find it, put like that. If we read Psalm 142, this cancer patient could make David's words to his own. I cried unto the Lord with my voice unto the Lord did I make my supplication. I poured out my complaints before him. I stood before him my trouble. When my spirit was overwhelming within me, then thou knewest my path. In the way wherein I walked, have they prevailed, laid a snare for me. I looked at my right hand and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. And I wonder how many of our patients could make these words to their own. That we in nursing have forgotten the core that is spiritual care. The core is about people, not tasks or diagnosis or treatment. So this will set the tone for our presentation today. So before I move on, I'll show you the same slide as Pam did. So I'm speaking to you from Bergen in Norway. And it's a beautiful place in the western part of Norway. And I'm sitting here in this white building to the bottom right, which is the university where I'm working. So I bring you greetings from Europe and from Norway. And in Europe, we're going to have a regional conference in April next year, actually at our university. And if you look here and you find Spain in the bottom of the map, NCFI will hold the next World Congress in 2024 in Madrid in Spain. So hope to see many of you in Europe. So Pam, or was it Kathy, introduced the aims for this conference. So I'll just, I want you to pay attention to that you can think about your experiences related to spiritual care and spirituality when we're going to talk about that. And you will have possibility to discuss in the breakout rooms about it. It's very important that you who attend this conference take home an clear understanding of what spirituality is in nursing, because there is too many who do not. And I want us in NCFI to know. And then we will talk about strategies to assess and address spiritual needs and resources. I have a hang-up with resources because I think it is not right that we as nurses are so focused on problems and needs And especially in the area of spirituality, many patients bring resources with them in a very difficult time. And we have to be aware of those and ask for those and help patients to continue to use them. Yeah, and then opportunities to promote spiritual care in our workplace. So that might be in clinical practice, it might be in education, or you might be a student who work different places or have your placement different places. And there are many obstacles, but there are also many possibilities for us where we are to address it. So I hope that being together these few hours today will strengthen your courage to speak up about spirituality. So for myself, I have 40 years as a nurse, 40 years since I graduated in 1982. I've been working as a teacher in 35 or 37 years. And the last 25 years, I've been doing research, mainly in the area of spirituality. And the last 14 years together with Professor Pam Cohn. So if we go to the evidence, research shows that nurses continue to report not feeling well prepared for spiritual care. So there are two aspects of that. One is to say that the education is too poor, and many places it actually is. So our students are not well enough prepared. But on the other hand, I think you will never, or we will never feel well enough prepared, because this is a lifelong learning. So the question is, do we prepare our students with a good enough foundation so they can continue to learn? And do our leaders in clinical practice take on this responsibility? So nurses report being unsure about what spirituality and spiritual care is. That is not necessary. So if you come across nurses who are unsure, you can ask them, have you studied this? Have you been reading books? Have you been reading articles? Or is it just that you are unsure about it and somebody should help you with it? Take responsibility. Nurses also report lacking a professional language to talk and to document about spiritual care. And that is an ongoing challenge. Another aspect is that our students report that they see very few role models in their clinical placement. So it's difficult for students to learn. Well, there is a private aspect of spirituality, but you who attend here and who are working as nurses, please help the students to understand what it can look like, how you follow up, how you care in ways that are spiritual. They need role models so they can learn. Yeah. And then also research shows that students can improve spiritual care competencies through education. So we have documented that. So there are hope, but we have to deal with spirituality in nursing as we do with other aspects of nursing. So this is not a question. This is an exclamation mark. Spiritual care is part of nursing. Our ethical conduct is saying so very clearly in the International Council of Nursing, and you might have it in your countries also. It's very important to look into the ethical codes to see how is this addressed in the code. It's integrated in many nursing theories, and it's a part of, I would say, almost every introductory book in nursing. There is a chapter, it's not necessarily called spirituality, it can be called hope or meaning or different words, but it deals with this aspect. It's a part of the documentation system in healthcare. And my question to you are, do you have professional guidelines saying something about this? the palliative care area, that is like a lighthouse when it comes to spirituality, because death and dying is kind of bringing out, and it becomes obvious to everybody. And people who are working in palliative care are people who can hold the suffering and the pain and the questions arising when facing death. So in that part, my experience is that it's most integrated. And even in countries like in Ukraine, where we all know where is now, that has a healthcare system and a nursing profession that is very much task-oriented and being assistants of doctors. Nurses working with dying patients, they understand what spiritual care is. Yeah. So in the country where I come from, the patients using municipality services like home care and nursing homes, they have a right that spirituality should be a part of their care. So again, my question to you are, you have to look through the documentations or through the guidelines or white papers in the state or the country where you live to see if this is integrated. And if it is, then you have to use it to kind of promote the spirituality is more clearly addressed in clinical practice. So, what is spirituality and spiritual care? Well, in the US, you have this North American Nursing Diagnosis Association. In other parts of the world, we do not have it. Well, but even in Scandinavia, it has come in through the back door because of the electronic documentation systems we have that is now aligned with the NANDA diagnosis systems. So for spirituality, early on, Nanda said it's related to meaning and purpose, to love and belonging, hope versus hopelessness and despair. And at the moment, I mean, Nanda is almost the only one that has hope in as a key aspect to spirituality. So I'm just waiting that it will come back in other definitions also, because I really believe it together with meaning and love and belonging. Hope is very, very important. And then religious beliefs, values and practices or faith traditions and a sense of the transcendence. So I reckon you are familiar with this because it's integrated in your teaching and nursing books. So this gives you a special advantage, I would say, when you use the Nanda to kind of say what spirituality is. In the research I've been doing, and here in Europe, we have used this definition of spirituality. It comes from the European Association of Palliative Care, and it's more wordy, and I find it helpful because we often discuss what is the kind of umbrella concept here. Is it meaning? Is it existential? Is it spiritual? So this definition here says that the umbrella concept is spirituality. And that is a dynamic dimension of human life that relates to the way persons can be individuals or more community-focused places. So how we experience, express, and or seek, and you see meaning, purpose, transcendence, and the way we connect. So here the key words are meaning, purpose, transcendence, and connection. So how we connect to the moment, to ourselves, to others, to nature, to the significant, and the sacred. So these key words you will find in most definitions nowadays: meaning, purpose, transcendence, connection. And the good thing with this definition is that it says that spirituality is multidimensional. So we have the existential challenges that often surface in life events when life is difficult. So it can be questions, it can be a cry out, it can be kind of pondering or thinking of, but it's related to, you see, my identity, who am I, meaning, suffering, death, guilt, shame, reconciliation, forgiveness, freedom, responsibility, hope, and despair, love, and joy. So you see, there's a lot of existential challenges that can come out of a life crisis. It also says that value-based considerations and attitudes are a part of spirituality. So then you had to listen, what's most important for a person? Is it a relation to themselves? Is it family, work, nature, art, ethics, moral, life itself? And then lastly, the third one is religious considerations and foundations. So our faith and beliefs and practices, relationship with God, or the ultimate. So you see, the umbrella is spirituality, and then existential and meaning is a part of that here, and then values and religious considerations. So this way makes a lot of sense to me, and I like this definition. So perhaps you like it, or perhaps it doesn't fit that well with where you live and work. So you have to find other words. Spiritual care, that is care that recognizes and responds to the human spirit when facing with life-changing events. And that is the kind of a key word, the life-changing events, because they often kind of wake us up from our everyday mood where we are just not thinking so much about the big questions. It's more practical things, to get up in the morning and to what to eat and how to drive and to get where you want to be and the plans you have. But when you experience life-changing events, then other aspects are surfacing. So you see here can be including the need for meaning, for self-worth, to express oneself, for faith support, perhaps rites, prayer, or sacrament, or simply a sensitive listener. Spiritual care begins with encouraging human contact in compassionate relationship and moves in whatever direction need requires. So that's why Wilfred McSherry, he asked the patient one time, and he said, "Have you received spiritual care?" And the patient said, "Oh, yes, but I'm not sure that the nurse who provided it was aware of it." So you see, the sensitive listener and the kind of compassionate relationship is a very important key in our nursing care. That is what touches our soul and our spirit. And then it says, it moves in whatever direction needs requires. So I often use this metaphor here as the open door, because you might not know where the conversation will take you. When there is a trustful relationship, do you dare to go through that door and to see what the landscape is behind there? I think that's what many students struggle with. Well, what if I say something wrong? Or if I make it worse for the person? I don't know what to say. Okay. So I think that is related to our the courage as a nurse, and that we know that we can listen to a patient without taking the responsibility to solve all the problems, but often to be this sensitive listener can be very healing for a person. So do you dare to sit on a chair and to listen to a person and to kind of give of your time and your presence? It can be very healing. So I want to take you and to introduce you to a concept that I found very helpful to understand why spirituality is so important in nursing. That's a guy called, I have one slide more here, so this is more research about why spiritual care is important in nursing. So research shows that spiritual care helps patients to cope with adversity. It can help them to gain inner peace and strength. It relieves suffering. It can increase experience of well-being and increase hope and motivation. Nurses sometimes say that they see the spiritual strength is very important in rehabilitation, for example. And spirituality can also strengthen the feeling of belonging and the experience of being loved, which is very important. I think we should talk more about love in nursing, professional love. It's very healing. So here we go to this gentleman that passed away a long time ago, Carl Jaspers. He has a very interesting concept called limit situations. So limit situations are these life events that we experience that we cannot change. So we can experience illness or different kinds of loss, can be losing kind of our honor, can be losing our job, can be losing our prestige. It's a lot of things we can lose that is painful. Death is the ultimate limit situation, but also threats of such a things like waiting for a diagnosis. Yeah. So I'm sure many of you have experienced limit situations where you have lost things that is important to you and you cannot change it. You just have to live with it. And as nurses, we meet many people who experience limit situations. So these limit situations, they cause pain and suffering, but they also make us wonder and reflect. So it's like you are stopped. And sometimes we say, I plan to do so and so, God willingly, or if, yeah. But when you are in a limit situation, you realize that my life cannot be taken for granted. You just know it deep in your soul, that you are vulnerable and that your life can be over or someone you love or are connected to can die. So when you're in a limit situation, life suddenly is experienced very different from when you're not there. So limit situations, they can lead us to become more aware of what is important in life. I mean, if I asked you if you could write up kind of the 5 most important things in your life, you might be having difficulties in doing it. But if you were in a limit situation, you could do it. And then you could see that you have given right priorities to things or that you have not done so. Because here you just know what's important. And the limit situations also challenge us to reflect more deeply about life. And it has the possibility to mature us ethically and intellectually. I mean, you can become bitter. That's another possibility of a limit situation, of your loss. But if you're able to use this to kind of reflect and mature, it can come something beautiful out of it. And you might have met people who have had a difficult life and that have become very wise and warm and wonderful people. So to use Jasper's word, they then have grown and matured through the limit situation. Well, I'll take you into a hospital situation. So this is a dear friend of mine who shared this situation. She worked in a medical ward, and she was caring for Mr. Robertson, who was 75 years old and admitted to a medical ward for pneumonia. And she chatted with him in the hallway and commented he had a very nice woolen jacket. And he said, you know, that's my wife who knitted that. And, you know, she passed away in this unit just a year ago today. And I miss her so much. So later in the day, the nurse came into Mr. Robertson's room, and she was going to give him a medication, intravenous medication, and it had to be a minimum of 4 minutes. So she sat down on the chair beside his bed and started to give him the medication. And then he said, I want to die. And she said, I believe you. And then she had to sit there for 4 more minutes because that was the time of the medication. So she looked at him and he started to tell her more about his life, about his family that lived very far away. And she was aware of it because he had had no visitors the 2 days he'd been in the hospital. So he was lonely. He could see very little meaning. And he grieved his wife deeply. So after he had shared some of what was on his heart, he actually said that, you know, I also want to live. And then the time was gone. The medication was in, and she had more medication. So she said to him, you know, I will come back in later today when I have time and we can talk more. So you see this the slide here. So what kind of spiritual cues did you see in Mr. Robertson's situation? If you look at the multidimensional fields, what do you recognize? You just have to speak with yourself at this moment.
I'm seeing some words on purpose.
Yes.
Lots of purpose.
Yeah.
Existential challenges, a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The nurse is a bridge.
Yeah.
We see despair. On the other hand, trust, perhaps in the nurse, trusting her enough to speak these challenging thoughts.
Yeah.
And then there's a conflict, wanting death, but also wanting life.
Yeah. And you see that the family was very important to him. So by listening to this story, I mean, there are a couple of things we can learn. One thing is that it might not always take a lot of time. So do you still open your mind that there can be something of great importance for patients, even though you don't have so much time? I mean, this happened within 4 minutes. And of course, he came back and I continued. But he moved from, I want to die, to I see I can continue living. And the other thing is that in this story, there is no religious cues. So I want us to kind of broaden our understanding of spirituality to be expressed sometimes, well, depending on where you live on the world and what kind of patients you work with, sometimes it can be without religion, so that we are not kind of saying spirituality equals religion, because then we can miss out very important and key aspects of spirituality. So this patient was so full of his pain in life that when the nurse was sitting there, it just poured out. Other times, we need more time, and patients need more time to really share with us. So the situations are very, very different. So I want to show you this slide, which is from research that Pam and I have done. It was a very interesting research because we compared nurses and patients. If they wanted, if the nurse were comfortable with assessing a patient about spiritual matters, and we asked the patients if they were comfortable with being assessed. So what we found with the patients is that, at least in our culture, some patients don't want to be talked to about this. They don't see it as the nurse's domain. It's very private, very personal, and nurse should not address it. And then there's a group who say, you might ask. And then there was one group that, oh, I would love if you would ask about this. It's so important in my life. And what we saw was that the actions that was building trust, like listening, being attentive, recognize and have an interest for what was important, moved the openness of the patients towards it's good if you ask. And also caring attitudes about being respectful, open, and interested also moved it towards it's good if you ask. So you see, the relationship is very, very important between the nurse and the patient for what they want to share with us. Another model we made, and the article we call Discerning the Healing Path, how nurses assist patients spiritually in diverse healthcare settings, was that the nurse, if you see at the bottom, the nurse has to be able to, we call it shepherding the process through building trusting relationship. If the trust breaks, then the process will finish. And then at the top, the nurse has to be willing to overcome his or her comfort zone. I talk a lot with our students about this with the comfort zone, and they know exactly what we're talking about, and you might too. So if you are not willing to kind of go beyond what you're comfortable with, you might not be able to provide spiritual care. So then we found a process in 3 steps. But the first one is like, you have to tune in on spirituality, open yourself, look for sign, recognize sign, and then move on to uncover what are the deep concerns of the patients. So you have to discern the time and also respect the patients. But we as nurses have to dare to go deeper also. And often that is the reason why we are not uncovering what is the concerns of the patients. We do not dare to go deeper. And then to facilitate the healing, follow the person's pace, attentive, engaging. That can be a diversity of, what shall I say, what a nurse do. It can be from being with the patient, sitting, holding a hand, serving coffee to the family, praying, listening. It depends on what the needs are and the resources are. And in that, the nurse has to balance herself in the profession. It's very important. Collaboration with family come out as very strong, and also the teamwork. And hopefully you work in a place where you can talk about these things so that you know who to use for different patients so that the patients can get the best care. And then in the Norwegian context, advocating priest care come out as very strong. That's because in our hospitals we have chaplains, and I mean in our municipalities there are a priest in every municipality. So the priest came out as a very trusted person. So they said to them, it doesn't mean you're very ill. It's just that the chaplain is so good in talking with people, and you don't need to be religious. It's just the nurses saw the hospital chaplain as a person with more time and with deep insight into talking with others. So this might be a helpful model for you to work. You could bring it to work and discuss it. Or you could use it and reflect on it related to a specific patient situation you've had. So then I move on to I have a favorite of talking about you have to use both ears when you are doing a spiritual assessment. So you have to look for the patient's main concern. And it can be a question. It can, as we heard from Mr. Robertson, or it can be, as the first patient I mentioned, who said, was I too soft-spoken, that nobody understood what was on my heart? So about meaning and uncertainty about the future is often a part of it, but also guilt, or it can be shame. So just be aware of what is the patient's main concern. And then I think you both in Canada and US are much better than we in Europe, because you live in such a multicultural and multi-faith societies. So your ear, the second one, might be more developed than ours. I say some things that this second Norwegian ear is almost not there at all, if you're not very clearly a Muslim. Yeah. So do you assess the faith, worldview, tradition, and culture the person have, so that you can plan the follow-up of the patient not related to your worldview or faith and tradition, but to the patient? And then one reminder or one challenge for you. When you hear these things that often come out as a question, do you hear it as a problem for you to solve? Or do you hear it as an invitation to journey with the person? Because they don't expect us to solve their problems or to answer these questions. It comes out as a question or a cry, because it's so troublesome for them. So this journeying with, being able to listen, to kind of look into and consider what is it really about, that is the invitation for us. So there are many ways we can assess a patient. I believe you are familiar with the FICA and with HOPE, these questions that are related to, what's your problem? Do you belong to a faith a community? Does the situation kind of erase any specific areas we should attend to? And what does this mean for our care? I will promote an even easier way to assess a patient. So this is called 2QSAM. It's an article that was written by Linda Ross and Wilfred McSherry. So it's very easy to remember. So to ask the patient, what is the most important for you just now? Or you can say, what's important for you now? And if you have an awareness or an appearance, I should say in English, that shows the patients that you are actually interested in knowing, they might tell you. And then when you listen to it, you can talk about how can I help? But there might be things that is important that we cannot help with, but it still can be important for them to share about it. Yeah. So this 2QSAM, what's most important for you just now? and how can I help? I think we can ask at least one patient a day, and then we'll see what happens. So I'm going back to the research I mentioned that Pam and I have done. So there we compared, we had 20 questions that were developed by Elizabeth Johnson Taylor from literature. And when we compared the questions the nurses and the patients were most comfortable with asking or being asked, it was interesting to see that they agreed pretty much. Both the nurse and the patients, they wanted more open questions. So like, who supports you when you are ill? Or what supports you when you are ill? Or what do you rely on in times of illness? So both of these are quite open questions. And they like the least questions, how integrated are you in a spiritual community? Or would you like to explore religious method with someone? So I think this 2Q SAM question, it is open. And you know, it actually can remind us of a question another master once asked a blind man by the road. What can I do for you? So, what can we do? This is from JC and UC. And when I was reading this, it was already back in 2011 by Carson, Dr. Carson, who has studied and published greatly in the US about spirituality. And I thought when I was reading this, oh, that's it. Is these 3 areas so simple? It's 1 page in there, in that journal. So she writes about the ministry of presence, the importance of awareness, sensitivity, the active listening, to be empathic, that I am vulnerable and aware of that and can handle that, being committed and dwell in time. I'm sure if we have invited you to share about this examples when time has opened up, when you lose track of time, it's like holy moments. You could share a lot about such a things. So the ministry of presence, and you know, patients, they keep telling, I can see in their eyes if they are with me or not, if they are safe, so I can share with them or not. The ministry of words is very important. I mean, how we conduct assessment, but also how we talk about spiritual or religious concerns, how we offer support, prayer, reading of holy texts. And Elizabeth Johnson Taylor also has written, I actually could add that reference here, I remember now. She has written a short article about person-centered communication that is supporting spiritual care. So if it's low or medium or high in empathy, it's related to how we respond. Do we pick up the feelings? Do we dare to listen to what is on patients' hearts? So all that is related to ministry of words. So ministry of actions, it can be facilitating, it can be how you plan the morning bath so that people can come or they can listen to things is important. Provide quiet time or quiet space. It can be related to food, caring touch, make it possible for family to come and visit or friends, or to refer to spiritual counselors. I come from a country where the Lutheran Church has been very strong for many years. And in Protestant Christianity, there are very few rules. I mean, you can eat anything, you can wear anything, you can kind of pray anywhere, and But in many cultures and with different faith traditions, there are much more specific kind of preparation you need. So think, who are you? How deep is your understanding of how important this ministry of actions can be for a patient, either related to food or to dressing or to how a patient can pray or offering or whatever. So there can be a lot of very important things related to actions. And sometimes those actions can be ethically challenging for us as nurses. Am I okay with lifting up and offering to a Buddhist altar if the patient cannot do it? Can I pray or read text? Yeah. So we have to be aware of the challenges related to our being and doing when we are with patients. I will move on. I hope there are students attending the conference, because I have a few words to you, students and teachers also.
Tove, we have a group from Westmont College with 28 students and 5 faculty.
That's very good. I'm very happy. So I've been a part of a research team here in Europe since 2012. And we have conducted a research over many, many years. And we have a longitudinal study where we were following nursing students from they started their nursing program and until they finished 3 or 4 years later in 21 universities in 8 countries. And what we found is that factors strongly and consistently correlated with self-perceived spiritual care competency. This is students who have reported. That is related to students' own spirituality and spiritual attitude and involvement. And students' perception of spirituality and spiritual care, where holding a broad view was preferred. So if you think spirituality equals religion, that is seen as a narrow understanding of spirituality, as the definition I've been through is meaning holding a broader view. So I mean, who you are as a person is important for your competency in spiritual care. And the same goes with nurses, yeah. So then we found factors that were inconsistently and weaker correlated with perceived competencies. That was if you have a faith and if you were practicing spirituality or religious activities. Age, I mean, in most research, if you're older, you're more experienced and more mature and safe, I think. You have previous healthcare experiences and experiences of life events. So these things, they were impacting the competency. So perceived spiritual care competencies developed over time. So we have documented that in education, spiritual care competencies can develop if they are taught and addressed. And we also saw those with lower scores were the ones with the biggest increase. So what we found then, number 4 here, is that caring for patients, teaching, opportunities for discussion, experience of personal life events were identified of students as important in learning spiritual care. So teachers, do the students have to reflect on spirituality when they have clinical practice? Do we teach? Do they have to read? Do we facilitate discussions? These are things we can make sure that our students have to do, and in that way increase their competencies. Pam and I did a study in 2012, where we interviewed students. And their concern were that how to create a professional relationship with the patient and maintain it when spiritual concerns were recognized. So they felt that the spirituality was kind of adding a level of responsibility or danger or uncertainty. So what does it mean to be professional? So we found a process. And when I teach students, I think this is so right, because I see in the classroom that there are students who have to be there, but they do not open up for learning. They kind of just attend, but they close down. So opening up for learning, that is a three intertwined phase process, like a spiral, going through nursing education. So the first part is preparing for connection. So that is done in school, where they have to read and study, but also discuss. And then, who are you? If you come with a lot of wounds and a lot of problems, or as some of our students here who are religious illiterate, then you have a lot of preparation to do to be able to connect and support patients with the diversity of patient situations you face. And then reflecting on experiences is the key for continued preparation and growing in the ability to connect. So, if we want to increase competencies in spiritual care in nursing education, here are a list that you can follow if you are educators. It should be mandatory assignments. If not, it's those who need it most who do not come. It should be a recurrent focus through education. Reflective exercises is very important. Should be part of exams, so they understand it's important, and part of evaluation in clinical placements. And here is our book. It's written for you, just published. So for your workplace, you can use this in continued education. Interprofessional collaboration seems to be very important in spiritual care, not just with the chaplains, but with other healthcare professions too. So it's a leadership responsibility to foster person-centered care and not task-oriented. And if you are in leadership in the workplace, what about having spiritual care champions and promote role models? Yeah, so this nice picture here. This is the group we have been working together for almost 20 years now in research, and Pam has also been a part of it. And you see the EPIC network. This is linked to a website where we present the results of our research. And it's free to join the network, and I just welcome you. So with this EPIC network, we developed a competence, area of competences for undergraduate nursing and midwifery students, a toolbox and a matrix. So this is the matrix. This sums up what we know. The blue heading on the top, that is what we know is important for student selection at entry of nursing education. It can be difficult to measure, and it can be difficult to evaluate. But if you are compassionate, caring, have empathy, well aware of your personal spirituality and a wide view of spiritual care, then you are a very good candidate for nursing education when it comes to spiritual care. And then for teaching and learning environment, there are some characteristics that's important for learning. And you see the student as a person and also the clinical environment. I have no time to go through this with you. Oh, where am I? There. So there is an explanation of this matrix you can find if you go to the website. So these are the area of competence that we developed. There are 4 you see on your left hand side. The personal, the interpersonal, and then related to the nursing process. And then we have knowledge, skills, and attitudes for each of the competencies. And we have taken this forward in a research project that I'm leading called the SEP project, Spiritual Care Education and Practice Development. We have these work packages. So work package 4, we have developed a self-assessment tool for spiritual care competencies. And we have worked internationally to develop this. I have no time for this. It looks like this. This is for the first competence. Competence 1. So you see the knowledge. I understand the concept of spiritual care. And then you tick off, completely disagree or fully agree. So then you can score yourself for the 4 competencies and reflect on, do I score myself higher on the knowledge or the attitudes? And are my skills the kind of lowest area? Do I score myself higher in the personal part and my nursing skills are lower? So this is a tool for self-assessment and you find it on the EPIC website. So I just want you to go there. So we're coming to an end of my presentation. And my question to you are, how well are you dressed as a nurse for spiritual care? And this is the Nurses Christian Fellowship International Conference. So I've been talking about the evidence-based and I've used primarily a professional language. But I would like to share a verse from Colossians with you in the end, because Paul has an excellent advice for dressing as a nurse. And I mean, if we dress like this, the patients will love us and our colleagues too. So therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you have a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. So I hope you have had time to reflect on your own experience. They've been picking up a few strategies to address needs and resources, and also got some ideas for how you can promote spiritual care discussions in your workplace. So then I'll end my presentation. Just see, get my mouse back here.